Get ready for a deep dive into the awesome world of designing for space. Today, we're going to be checking out excerpts from Designing for Space, 4 stages of off-world adaptation. We're going to uncover the wild challenges and innovations across 4 distinct stages of space exploration. It's not just about building rockets. It's about creating environments where humans can not only survive, but actually thrive in the most extreme conditions you can imagine.
Yeah, and you know what's really captivating about this field is that it goes way beyond just, nuts and bolts and rivets and stuff like that. We're talking about human-centered design, but taken to the absolute, extreme.
Mm.
How do you create a space that keeps people physically and mentally healthy when everything we take for granted here on Earth? I mean, gravity, atmosphere, even just our sense of, up and down, it's all totally different.
Yeah, it's so easy to just focus on the really exciting, flashy stuff like rockets and spaceships. But I bet in reality, every tiny detail matters when you're designing something for space.
Oh, absolutely. Take the first stage, for instance, at gravity break. We're talking about the crazy forces of launch here. Literally every single element down to the material of the seat an astronaut is strapped into. It all has to be engineered to withstand incredible G-forces, intense vibrations, and super rapid acceleration.
So it's not just about making things strong then, right? They have to be super lightweight too. What kind of materials can even handle that?
Well, think about cutting edge materials like titanium or carbon fiber. And it's not just about brute strength either. It's about designing structures that are crazy lightweight, but still able to withstand those crazy pressures. They even pick the colors inside the spacecraft really carefully to help astronauts stay calm and focused during those super high stress moments.
Whoa, wait. The color of the walls can actually affect an astronaut's performance during launch.
Yeah, color psychology is actually super important. Certain colors can actually make people calmer and less stressed and anxious, while others can actually help people focus and be more alert. These might seem like small design choices, but they can make a huge difference in a super high-pressure environment like a rocket launch.
That's wild. It really shows you how much thought goes into literally every single aspect of designing for space. It's not just about getting to space. It's about making sure the astronauts are in peak condition the whole way.
Exactly. And then once we break free from Earth's gravity, things get even more interesting. Stage 2 is all about adapting to life in a microgravity habitat like the International Space Station. Here, our whole understanding of design is literally flipped on its head because up and down just disappear.
Okay, yeah, that's where my brain starts to melt a little bit. If there's no gravity, how do you even design a living space? Is it just like living in a giant ball pit where everything's just floating around?
Well, it's not quite a ball pit, but you're not too far off. Astronauts use every surface, walls, ceilings, you name it. Normal furniture is basically useless. Instead, you got to think about modular designs, like adaptable workstations that you can move around in tons of different ways.
And I bet things like Velcro and magnets become like the most important things ever
Yeah.
to keep everything from just floating away.
Oh, absolutely. You wouldn't want your tools drifting off in the middle of some crucial experiment, would you? But even beyond just those practical things, there's a huge focus on mental well-being in these environments. Imagine living in this tiny little space super far from home with nothing to ground you.
Yeah, that would probably mess with your head after a while.
Definitely. That's why designers pay a lot of attention to things like lighting. They use systems that mimic the natural day and night cycle to keep the astronauts' circadian rhythms in check. So that helps regulate their sleep patterns and their overall mood. Even the color schemes they use are specifically chosen to reduce stress and help with focus.
Wow. It's really amazing how design can have such a huge impact on both the physical and mental well-being of astronauts. But, okay, what happens when we want to go beyond just orbiting the Earth, when we want to start living on other planets? That's where stage 3 interplanetary design comes in, right?
Right. Now we're talking about setting up shop on the moon or even Mars. It's not just about visiting anymore. It's about creating a real home away from home.
Wow.
And that brings a whole new set of challenges, especially when it comes to resources.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to pack enough building materials to construct a whole habitat on Mars. How do we even start to tackle that?
Well, that's where this idea of in situ resource utilization comes in, or ISRU for short. Basically, it's about using what's already there. So imagine landing on Mars, and instead of unpacking prefab modules, you start 3D printing your habitat using Martian dust.
Ooh, hold on. We could build structures out of Martian dust. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
It's not magic, but it's pretty close. We're talking about some serious next-level 3D printing technology that can basically bind Martian regolith. That's the loose dust and rock on the surface, and it turns it into a solid building material. This is a total game changer for space exploration because it means we don't have to ship everything from Earth.
That's incredible. That opens up so many possibilities for long-term settlements.
Yeah.
But building a habitat is just one part of it, right? We also got to figure out how to get around on these alien landscapes. I'm guessing walking around the block to grab a coffee isn't really an option on Mars.
You're right about that. Mobility is a huge design challenge on other planets. Take the moon, for example. It's only got about 1/6 of Earth's gravity. Imagine trying to walk normally in that. You'd be bouncing all over the place.
Yeah, that would be a problem. So what are we talking? Moon buggies or some kind of crazy futuristic jetpacks?
Those are definitely options. But nature has already given us some pretty awesome solutions. Astronauts on the moon have actually been using a kind of kangaroo hop to get around, and it turns out that's a really efficient way to move in low gravity.
Wait, the kangaroo hops? So we're like taking design tips from the animal kingdom now? I
Right.
love it.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of something called biomimicry. By looking at how animals have adapted to different environments, we can come up with some really cool solutions for human mobility on other planets.
So we've got our Martian houses built out of dust. We're hopping around like lunar kangaroos. But what happens when it's time to come home? I have a feeling it's not as simple as just buying a return ticket.
You're right about that. Stage 4 Terra reintegration has its own unique set of challenges. After spending a long time in space, coming back to Earth can actually be really hard. Your body has adapted to a totally different environment. Imagine coming back to full gravity after months of weightlessness. It's basically like your body has to relearn how to be on Earth.
Whoa, so it's like reverse culture shock.
Hmm.
But for your body, what kind of things happen when you come back to Earth after being in space for so long?
Well, for starters, your muscles can get really weak because they haven't had to work against gravity. Your bone density can decrease, and you might get dizzy and have problems with your balance. Even your vestibular system, which controls your balance, gets thrown off. It's a lot for your body to adjust to.
That's crazy. I never really thought about the challenges of coming back to Earth. So what do we do about it? How do we make that transition easier for astronauts? Do they have to go through some kind of intense rehab program?
Yeah, rehab is a really important part of coming back to Earth. Designers are working on special landing systems that try to make the impact on your body as small as possible during reentry.
So much gentler landing than that rocket launch we were talking about before. What happens once they're back on solid ground?
They spend time in special rehab facilities. These are designed to help them regain their strength, get their balance back, and just get used to Earth's gravity again. They use a mix of physical therapy, special exercise equipment. They even use virtual reality to simulate everyday activities. It's all about making that transition back to Earth as smooth as possible.
It's incredible how much thought and care goes into every single stage of a space mission, from blasting off to coming back home. It just shows you how crucial design is for human exploration and well-being in space.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is that a lot of the stuff we learn from designing for space can actually be used right here on Earth to create more sustainable and resilient solutions for all kinds of problems.
Okay, that is where I want to pick up next time because that sounds super interesting.
I agree. There's a lot to unpack there. So join us for part 2 of our deep dive. We'll be exploring how these crazy ideas from space design are actually influencing innovation and problem solving right here on our own planet.
Welcome back, Space Explorers. Last time we took a trip through those first 3 stages of space design, from the crazy forces of launch to living on other planets. But like we were talking about, those innovations from space design aren't just stuck up in the cosmos. It's time to explore how those ideas are coming back down to Earth, to influence solutions and even change the way we think about design right here on our own planet.
Yeah, it's wild how those super extreme challenges of space often end up mirroring problems we face right here on Earth, just on a totally different scale. When you really think about it, designing like a self-sustaining habitat on Mars has a lot in common with designing for sustainability in a place where resources are super limited right here on our own planet.
Okay, yeah, I get the connection, but how does that actually play out in like real-world solutions? What are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
All right, let's take closed loop systems, for instance, something that's like mission critical for those long hauls in space. In a spacecraft or a habitat on Mars, every single resource is precious. You can't just run to the store to restock, right? So you have to design these systems where there's almost zero waste and Everything is constantly recycled and reused.
Right, like those water filtration systems that clean wastewater so they can use it again and again. I've seen those in the space station documentaries.
Exactly. And now those exact same ideas are being used to make water management systems here on Earth way more sustainable. In places that are running out of water, closed-loop systems inspired by space exploration are helping save water, reduce waste, and make sure people have access to clean water.
That is a seriously cool example. It's amazing how something designed for a completely different environment can have such a huge impact on solving problems here on our own planet.
And it's not just water either. Think about energy. We need a ton of efficient energy out in space, and that's led to huge advances in things like solar power technology. When your entire habitat on Mars relies on those solar panels for power, efficiency is everything.
Uh-huh. It's like off-grid living taken to the extreme.
Right. And all the new designs for solar panels, ways to store that energy, and how we manage the power we've got that were all made for space are now making solar power more accessible and efficient for us here on Earth, which is helping us move towards those clearer and more sustainable energy sources.
I'm sensing a theme here. It
Yeah.
seems like a lot of what space design has to deal with, limited resources, crazy efficiency needs, closed-loop systems, all that stuff, is forcing us to come up with solutions that are more sustainable and make life on Earth better.
Exactly. And it's not even just about the tech, it's about the way of thinking, the whole design philosophy behind it. Space design forces you to get creative, to toss those old ways of doing things out the window, and to really think about the long game. It's about designing for a future where resources are super valuable, and sustainability isn't just some nice option, it's essential for survival.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like space design is a test lab for figuring out how to live sustainably. We're figuring out how to do more with less, close those resource loops, and create systems that can handle whatever gets thrown at them, even in crazy environments.
Exactly. And those lessons are super important as we deal with things like climate change, resources running out, and just needing better, more sustainable ways of doing things here on Earth.
So it's not just about taking a specific gadget from space and using it here. It's about a whole new mindset, a whole new approach to how we tackle design problems.
Exactly. Think about biomimicry again. That's a great example of how space design is inspiring a more sustainable approach down here. By taking a look at how nature solves problems, we can find some really innovative solutions, everything from buildings that don't guzzle energy to materials that are both super strong and super light.
Yeah, like that kangaroo hop giving us new ways to move around in low gravity. What are some other ways we're using biomimicry in design here on Earth?
Oh, tons. Architects and engineers are designing buildings that are based on the way termite mounds keep themselves cool, creating these natural, energy-efficient systems. Plus, people are making brand new materials based on spider silk. Incredibly tough, but crazy lightweight.
Wow, that's awesome. It's like we're learning how to design by working with nature, taking inspiration from the incredible stuff it's already figured out.
That's it. Working with nature, not against it. That's one of the key things about sustainable design.
Okay, so we've got closed-loop systems, solar power, biomimicry, all super inspiring examples of how space design is helping us find solutions here on Earth. But what about the human side of things? We talked before about how designing for space means thinking about the astronauts' mental well-being. Can we learn anything from that to make design better here on Earth?
Absolutely. Designing for space has taught us so much about how to create environments that make people feel good, even in really tough situations. Think about the International Space Station. They had to think about everything from lighting and colors to the layout of the living spaces to keep stress down, help people relax, and create a feeling of community up there.
Yeah, it's like designing this tiny little self-contained world where people have to live and work together, and often under a lot of pressure.
Right, and those same ideas can be used in design down here on Earth. Hospitals are starting to use things like nature, natural light, and calming colors in their designs to make a more healing and less stressful environment for their patients.
That makes a ton of sense. I can definitely see how a more thoughtfully designed hospital room can make a big difference in how a patient recovers.
And it's not just hospitals. We're seeing these ideas in schools, offices, and even homes. It's about realizing that the way we design the spaces we live in has a huge impact on how we feel, our moods, how well we work, and even our overall health.
So it's not just about making things look nice. It's about designing spaces that help people feel good on a deeper level.
Exactly. And that's something space design has really pushed to the forefront.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the technical stuff like closed-loop systems and energy efficiency to these more human-centered design ideas that are showing up in architecture, healthcare, even just everyday life. It seems like the influence of space design is much bigger than just building rockets and spaceships.
No question, those innovations that came out of having to explore space are finding their way back down to Earth and are changing how we live, how we work, and how we interact with our world.
It's really cool to see how the challenges of space are pushing us to think outside the box and come up with solutions that benefit everyone. But we've gone through 3 stages of space design, and we've got one left. I'm curious, what can we learn from that final stage, Terra reintegration, that could be helpful here on Earth?
That's a great question, and one that I'm excited to jump into in the next part of our deep dive. Coming back to life on Earth after a space mission has some unique challenges, and as it turns out, those challenges have a lot to teach us about being adaptable, resilient, and how important human connection really is.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the world of space design. We've talked about the crazy forces of launch, living on other planets, and even how space design is changing things right here on Earth. But now it's time to wrap up our journey with that final stage, Terra reintegration. And we're not just talking about physically coming back home to Earth, we're talking about all the mental and emotional stuff astronauts have to deal with too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how even just coming home can be this huge design challenge after you've been in space.
Mm.
You'd think it would be like the easiest part, right? But it's actually super complicated.
I bet. I mean, you've gotten used to floating around, totally different day and night cycles, even just feeling isolated.
Yeah.
Coming back to Earth's gravity, all the hustle and bustle and all that sensory input, it must be totally overwhelming, like your brain and body have to relearn how to be on Earth.
Exactly. Astronauts say they often feel super disoriented and clumsy when they first come back. Imagine trying to walk normally after your muscles have basically forgotten how to deal with gravity, or suddenly being bombarded with all the sights and sounds of everyday life after months of quiet and isolation.
I can see how that would take some getting used to. So how do we help astronauts deal with that transition?
Yeah.
What does the design process even look like for something like Terra reintegration?
Well, first, you got to understand all the physical and mental changes that happen to the body during spaceflight. We've talked about muscle and bone loss, but there are also changes to your heart, your immune system, even how your brain processes information from your senses.
So coming home isn't just about hopping off the spaceship and going back to your old routine. It's about dealing with all these changes that have happened to you both physically and mentally.
Exactly. And that's where design is so important. It's about coming up with systems and environments that really help astronauts get back to life on Earth. For example, we've got special landing systems now that try to soften the blow when they come back into the atmosphere so that initial hit of gravity isn't quite so jarring.
Makes sense. I bet going from 0G to full Earth gravity would be a real shock to the system.
No kidding. And then once they're back on the ground, astronauts go through this carefully planned rehab program. They go to special facilities with physical therapy. They've got equipment that helps them rebuild their muscles and bones, and some even use virtual reality to simulate everyday stuff and help them get their balance and coordination back.
Sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
But what about the mental and emotional side of things?
Oh, that's a big part of it too. Think about it. You're coming back to a world that seems super loud, bright, and crazy after months of quiet and simplicity. It can be overwhelming, even scary for some people.
Yeah, I get that. That could be super disorienting. So what do we do? Therapy, some kind of reverse center deprivation chamber.
Well, therapy is definitely part of it. Astronauts talk to mental health professionals who help them work through their experiences and get used to being back. But from a design standpoint, it's all about creating environments that help them slowly get used to all those sensations again.
It's like easing them back into the craziness of life on Earth.
Exactly. They might go to rehab centers with access to nature, calming spaces with natural light and colors, and they do therapeutic activities that help them reconnect with their senses and their emotions. It's all about giving them a supportive environment where they can adjust to being back at their own pace.
It's amazing how something as basic as coming home needs such a thoughtful design approach. It really highlights how design is crucial for making sure people are okay at every point in a space mission.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is that what we learn from Terra reintegration can actually be used to help people right here on Earth who are dealing with all sorts of challenges and transitions.
Okay, now I'm really interested. How can helping astronauts readjust to Earth help people in everyday life?
Well, think about that sensory overload we were talking about. That's something that happens to a lot of people in our world that's just constantly busy and stimulating. And the design principles that help astronauts reintegrate, Creating those calming spaces, bringing in nature, giving people a chance to be mindful and reflect. That's all stuff that can help anyone who's feeling stressed out by modern life.
That's a really interesting connection. It makes total sense that the same things that help astronauts adjust to such a huge change could also help people deal with everyday stress and change.
Totally. And it's not just sensory overload either. Remember how important community and connection are in space missions? Astronauts really depend on each other for support during those long missions, both physically and emotionally. And that sense of community is super important when they're coming back to Earth, too.
Right. Having people you can lean on is huge when you're going through any kind of big life change, whether it's coming back from space or moving to a new city or starting a new job.
Exactly. And those lessons we're learning from space about building strong connections and a sense of belonging are really important for building stronger communities here on Earth. It reminds us that we all need each other, and that connection is so important for all of us.
So as we finish up our deep dive into those 4 stages of space design, we've uncovered a ton of knowledge and some serious inspiration, not just about the future of space exploration, but also about how we can live more sustainably, design better environments for people, and build stronger communities right here on Earth. It's really awesome how the challenges of space are pushing us to think differently and find solutions that help everyone.
Couldn't agree more. Space design shows how creative and adaptable humans can be, and it highlights our desire to explore and push those boundaries of what's possible. And as we've seen, what we learn from designing for the extreme environments of space can totally change how we live and design our world right here on Earth.
It's a good reminder that even though space seems so far away, it's actually connected to our lives here in so many ways. So keep looking up at those stars and let the wonders of space inspire you. This has been The Deep Dive, signing off.